They found the first bits of it in 1991, but nobody really knew what they had until 2002. They were looking at a bone that defied physics, a piece of anatomy that the universe should have stamped return to sender. This thing, Hatzegopteryx, was not just a pterosaur, it was a tactical, specialized nightmare. It was evolution saying, I know you think you know giant flying reptiles, but watch this. I'm talking about a creature with the wingspan of an F-16 fighter jet, about 36 feet tip to tip, but that is honestly the least interesting part about it. You can picture big wings, but can you picture a predator that stood taller than a modern giraffe, with a head the size of a Honda Civic? Because that is exactly what Hatzegopteryx was. This was not the thin, delicate flying lizard you see painted on murals. This was the flying version of a heavy bomber, operating over an ecosystem that had no business containing something so terrifyingly large. This was not just a monster.
This was a consequence. And yeah, before you bring up Quetzalcoatlus, stop. We will get there. Quetzalcoatlus was the tall, elegant supermodel of the Asdartids. Hatzegopteryx was the linebacker who swallowed the supermodel whole. They are not the same thing, not even close. Let's set the stage because the setting is the secret ingredient here. We are going back about 66 million years, right to the very end of the Cretaceous period. But we aren't in Alberta or Montana or Mongolia. We are in Europe, specifically what is now Romania. We are standing on an ancient, sprawling landmass known as Hatzeg Island. This place was weird. I mean, truly, deeply, biologically weird. Hatzeg Island was an oasis of isolation, cut off from the massive continental landmasses by warm, shallow seas. When you cut an ecosystem off like that, something happens, an evolutionary phenomenon called insular dwarfism. The animals there, the dinosaurs, were starved for resources.
They had to shrink down to survive. Every meal, every calorie mattered. So you had the sauropods, the long-necked titans, but here on Hatzeg, they were mini-me versions. You had Magurosaurus, a sauropod that looked like a very large cow with a long neck. It should have been 100 feet long and 70 tons. Instead, it was barely 30 feet long, maybe 3 or 4 tons. Cute, right? No, not cute. It was a living snack bar waiting for the top predator. You also had tiny ornithopods, things like zomixes, which were about the size of a goat. This island was populated by the short kings of the Mesozoic, a gentle, sun-drenched, no-resource environment. And then Hatzegopteryx arrived, or perhaps it evolved right there. The standard ecological rules were completely broken here. Everywhere else in the world, the top predator was a terrestrial animal, T-Rex, Carnotaurus, maybe a massive croc like Deinosuchus patrolling the swamps.
But on Hatzeg, the big, beefy theropods never made it across the water to establish dominance. The island's biggest terrestrial carnivore, Bolauer bunduk, was a relative of Velociraptor, but it was basically a 12-foot dromaeosaur with confusing double-sided claws. Respectable, maybe, but absolutely not the apex predator. That title belonged to the thing in the sky. Hatzegopteryx occupied the niche that T-Rex occupied on the mainland. It wasn't a scavenger, it wasn't a fish eater, and it certainly wasn't an opportunistic vulture waiting for something to die. Hatzegopteryx was the airborne lion of Hatzeg. It hunted small, armored, and generally confused dinosaurs. Let's talk about the hardware required to pull off this level of ecological dominance. When scientists first started piecing together the bits of Hatzegopteryx, they immediately recognized it was an Asdarchid, the family of giant pterosaurs. But something felt off. The bones were disproportionately robust.
They found a gigantic humerus, the upper arm bone, and pieces of the neck. And those neck bones, the cervical vertebrae, are where the whole story changes. If you look at Quetzalcoatlus, the famous Texas pterosaur, it has a long, slender, almost impossibly thin neck. It looked like a mobile fishing pole, perfect for stabbing small fish and maybe probing mudflats. Its neck was delicate, almost fragile, and incredibly light. It was designed for reach and finesse. Hatzegopteryx said, "Nope, I do not do finesse." Its neck vertebrae were ridiculously short and thick. They were also heavily pneumatic, meaning they had large internal air sacs which kept them relatively light for their immense size, but the bone walls themselves were massive. They were designed to absorb immense shock and transmit massive force. They were like cannon barrels stacked one on top of the other.
I am serious, the largest vertebrae found was broader than it was long, roughly the size of a football.
Why the beefy neck? Because this thing wasn't gently snatching a fish out of the water. It was dropping out of the sky like a ballistic missile, accelerating under gravity and delivering a fatal blow to a small, heavy sauropod like Maggiorosaurus. Imagine the impact. You have a reptile potentially weighing 300 to 400 kilograms, the weight of a grizzly bear, hitting a target that weighs 3 tons. You need a neck that doesn't instantly snap upon collision. The neck was a shock absorber and a lever designed to hold up that gigantic skull. Speaking of the skull, this is where the Hatzegopteryx earns its reputation as an absolute unit. We are talking about a skull estimated to be roughly 9 to 10 feet long, the largest non-whale skull that has ever existed in history. Think about that for a second. Its entire head, from the tip of the beak to the back of the crest, was longer than many of the dinosaurs it ate.
The interesting structural detail here is that the beak wasn't just long and pointy like a sword, it was incredibly broad and deep. It was blunt and powerful, almost boat-shaped in cross-section. This is the difference between a rapier, Quetzalcoatlus, and a sledgehammer, Hatzegopteryx. Its jaws were essentially two massive armored beams designed not for delicate slicing, but for blunt trauma. Paleontologists theorize that Hatzegopteryx used two primary hunting methods, both requiring that specialized heavy-duty equipment. Method 1, the impaler. The pterosaur would fly low and fast, striking downward with the closed beak, essentially using it as a massive spike. If it hit a young Telmosaurus or Zolmixis, a dinosaur about the size of a deer, the force of the impact would be enough to instantly crush the spine or the ribcage. Death would be instantaneous. Method 2, the grab and gobble.
For slightly larger prey, say a juvenile Maggiorosaurus, the Hatzegopteryx didn't need to pierce armor. It could likely grab the prey, perhaps a limb or the neck, and then, using that tremendously powerful neck, simply lift it clear off the ground and fly away with it, or maybe just swallow it on the spot. I know you want to know about swallowing a dinosaur whole. We are getting there. Stay with me. To truly appreciate the nightmare fuel that Hatzegopteryx represents, you have to understand how it moved on the ground. These giant Ashdarchids were not clumsy flappers that crash land and then awkwardly shuffled around like busted pelicans. They were specialized terrestrial predators. When they landed, their massive wings folded up neatly and locked into position. The wing fingers, the fourth finger, folded back, and the creature stood on its elbows, wrists, and feet, a quadrupedal stance, a highly effective tripod. This stance gave them incredible height and mobility.
A resting Hatzegopteryx would have its massive skull held high, 7 or 8 meters off the ground, 25 feet of pure nightmare. Imagine you are a small ornithopod chewing on some low-lying ferns in a humid Hatzeg swamp. The air is thick, smelling of sulfur and damp vegetation. Suddenly, the shadow of a commercial airliner passes over you. Before you even look up, you hear the heavy, thudding gait of the predator approaching. It wasn't a light trot. Hatzegopteryx moved on all fours like a colossal giraffe with extremely long front legs, but with the menacing purpose of a big cat. It was stalking you. Its movement was a fast, bounding run, using the strong arm wings as propellive levers. It could cover massive distances rapidly. We are talking about a creature that could probably sprint as fast as a professional athlete over short distances, maybe 20 miles per hour, while standing taller than any two-story building in its environment.
When it spotted its prey, its height was an unmatched advantage. It could simply lower that enormous head, and the sheer weight of the skull and neck would bring the prey down, stunning it, crushing it, or maybe just scaring it into temporary paralysis. Now, let's address the most unbelievable part, the logistics of eating. The theory proposed by paleobiologists like Darren Naish is that Hatzegopteryx was a macropredator, meaning it hunted and consumed large vertebrates, including those dwarfed dinosaurs. Because it lacked teeth, it couldn't chew. Everything had to be processed by swallowing or by sheer blunt force trauma. For the small prey, like juvenile Zalmoxes or hatchling Telmetorosaurus, the beak's structure suggests a massive throat capacity. The sheer width of the mandible means it could literally unhinge its lower jaw, open up that enormous, terrifying face, and swallow an animal the size of a sheep whole. Picture that scene.
A small dinosaur, terrified, trying to hide in the undergrowth. This mountain of muscle and bone drops its head. The shadow engulfs the prey, and then, without any chewing, without tearing, just a massive, vacuum-like gulp, the prey vanishes. It's absolutely peak nightmare fuel. It's too big to be real, yet the bones are right here. I want to spend a moment on the comparison with Quetzalcoatlus northropi, because this is where the specialized meature of Hatzegopteryx really shines. Quetzalcoatlus was enormous, maybe even slightly larger in terms of absolute wingspan. We are talking about estimates up to 40 feet, and was known from North America. For a long time, Quetzalcoatlus was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the skies. But structurally, they were different species operating on entirely different budgets. Quetzalcoatlus had those extremely long, thin neck vertebrae.
It was built for efficiency and height, maybe less concerned with delivering massive killing blows and more concerned with covering vast distances and probing soft sediments for fish or carrion. Quetzalcoatlus was the super long-range strategic bomber. Hatzegopteryx was the specialized assault craft. Shorter neck, heavier frame, more robust skeleton overall. Its pneumatic bones, the air-filled structures that make pterosaurs so light, were organized differently. In Quetzalcoatlus, the air sacs extended deep into the bone structure, prioritizing weight reduction. In Hatzegopteryx, the air sacs were large, yes, but the bone cortex, the outside layer, was much thicker. This thickness added crucial structural integrity, making it heavier, yes, but making it infinitely stronger against rotational forces and impact shock. This suggests a creature that sacrificed some long-distance migratory capability for localized killing power.
Its environment, Hatzeg Island, was its perfect prison and its perfect kingdom. It didn't need to fly across an ocean. It needed to own every square mile of that island. The island environment is crucial here. In a normal ecosystem, such a large flying predator would face intense competition from terrestrial counterparts. A T-Rex would look at Hatzegopteryx and say, "Stay in the air, buddy." But on Hatzeg, Hatzegopteryx had no equal. It was the only creature big and powerful enough to reliably take down the few medium-sized dinosaurs that existed there. It was an evolutionary vacuum cleaner, filling the vacant position of apex predator. And it did so by becoming the most structurally fortified Ajdarchid we know. Let's look at the size one more time, because photos and diagrams don't always do justice to the sheer scale. When standing on the ground, the wing membrane would fold up along the arms, and the neck would be extended high.
You, a modern human, barely come up to the creature's elbow joint. If you stood next to its foot, your head would reach perhaps the beginning of the metatarsal bones. When it lowered its head, you would be looking into a set of jaws that could easily crush a car door. Its eye sockets were large, suggesting good vision, and the skull itself was complex. Unlike many other flying reptiles which tend toward a light honeycomb structure, the Hatzegopteryx skull had internal bony struts that reinforced the entire structure, especially around the jaw hinge. This wasn't to support teeth, it was to support the sheer forces generated when that head delivered a blow. Think about the sound of this thing. The air sacs, the powerful chest muscles, and the sheer volume of air moving through its enormous nasal passages. It probably didn't just squawk.
It likely produced deep, resonant bellows or roars, sounds that carried across the low-lying swamps and dense forests of the island, alerting every Magurosaurus and Telmatosaurus that the king was hunting. A sound that echoed across the Cretaceous wetlands, a sonic notification that told the world, you are currently beneath a predator that could erase you instantly. The discovery of Hatzegopteryx fundamentally changed how we view pterosaurs. For decades, they were seen as fragile, elegant gliders, the airborne equivalent of a seabird, nervous and quick. Hatzegopteryx redefined them as heavy, specialized, terrifying megafauna. It proved that some lineages of pterosaurs had evolved past the reliance on the sea and instead became inland masters of the terrestrial hunt. The early fragments, when they were first studied, led to confusion. Some scientists initially classified certain bone fragments as belonging to a gigantic theropod dinosaur.
It took the discovery of more recognizable pieces, the massive, blunt beak, the specific structure of the quadrate bone, to confirm it was, in fact, an Ajdarchid, but one built like no other. And the fact that it thrived on an island of biological anomalies makes it even more compelling. The Hatzeg ecosystem was a biological speed bump, a fascinating and short-lived experiment in size distortion.
Dwarf dinosaurs lived in the shadow of this flying giant that suffered no such resource limitations. If anything, the smaller size of its prey pool might have encouraged it to evolve the sheer brutality necessary to guarantee a kill with maximum efficiency, minimizing the energy expenditure of pursuit. It's like, why run around if you can just drop a 9-foot skull on the target? The Cretaceous ended eventually, of course. 66 million years ago, the Chicxulub asteroid hit, and while Hatzepopteryx might have reigned supreme over its little island kingdom, physics is physics.
The island would have been ravaged by the initial blast, the subsequent fires, tsunamis, and the global impact winter. It survived because it was powerful. It died because nothing is more powerful than planetary extinction. It's sobering to think that this absolute unit, this magnificent terror, was wiped out in a flash, along with its tiny dwarfed prey. It represents the final staggering gasp of evolutionary weirdness, right before the curtains closed on the age of reptiles. It stands as proof that when life gets creative and removes a few natural checks and balances, the result can be something straight out of a horror movie. A short-necked, 9-foot-headed, giraffe-height creature running on all fours, hunting miniature dinosaurs. Honestly, if you find this kind of deep history fascinating, the anatomy, the ecosystem, the pure, raw absurdity of what has existed on this planet, hit that like button.
Seriously, subscribing is free, and it helps me keep digging up the details on these magnificent monsters the world lost. The world of paleontology is constantly shifting, constantly giving us reasons to rethink what we thought we knew. Hatzegopteryx isn't just a fossil, it's a lesson that sometimes the most specialized, geographically restricted creatures are the ones that push the boundaries of biological possibility the furthest. It was a beast designed for the kill, forged in isolation, and reigning supreme over a bizarre, sun-drenched European island, a living tank with wings, a true gigachad of the Mesozoic. Thanks for watching, and until next time on The Lost World.